speech televised in Iran, Iranian President Ahmadinejad said he wants to have a face-to-face debate with President Obama, on television, of course. Joining us live is former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, John Bolton. How much would you pay to watch that?
Almost any amount. It would have to be a lot more interesting than our regular presidential debates.
It would be unbelievable. Now, this is not the first time that he has challenged this president or President Bush 43.
Right. I think this is a kind of game for him. It's a way, he knows that the challenge won't be taken up, so it's a way for him to say, look, I'm prepared to do it. They're the ones who are backing down. I do think there's a possibility, though, he has a hidden agenda, and that is he'll be coming to New York in September for the opening of the UN General Assembly, and he could easily say after Ramadan, look, all right, if the president doesn't want to debate me on television, that's fine, but why don't we meet behind closed doors and have the negotiation that President Obama has said he wants so much?
Any chance that would happen?
Well, I don't think, if I were President Obama, I wouldn't do it. Of course, if I were candidate Obama, I never would have agreed to or never would have proposed it to begin with. I think Ahmadinejad is in a position now where he doesn't have anything to lose by asking for those negotiations, and it could put the president in a difficult position.
All right, we can't live with, at least so we've said, with a nuclear-armed Iran, and neither can Israel. So there's sanctions. President Ahmadinejad today made some crack about he doesn't care how many sanctions. He put 4,000 sanctions on him. It's not going to make a bit of difference at all. Tell me, if we take military action against Iran, how does it play out? I mean, explain to me what you see.
Well, assuming it was the United States, I think it would be a successful effort. I think that we have the capability, at least based on what we know of the program, to destroy it. Israel, it's a little bit more questionable. What Iran's response would be, obviously, is the big question, and with a regime as irrational as this one, you can't be certain. But I think their most likely answer would be to attack Israel through Hezbollah and Hamas. I don't think that they would undertake some of the more dramatic steps that have been suggested, like trying to close the Straits of Hormuz.
It seems to me that there are a couple problems. One is to actually have, I assume it would be surgical strikes, and trying to identify and locate their nuclear weapons facilities. It would be difficult. Do you agree?
Well, we know where a number of them are.
A number of them, but not all of them, which leaves them able to drop something on Tel Aviv.
Right, and every day that goes by gives them the chance to build more. And that's one reason why when you hear people say, oh, it's still 2 years before they get nuclear weapons, I think you need to take that with a grain of salt, because it's precisely our lack of confidence in the totality of our intelligence that ought to make us worried they're closer to getting a weapon than some people say.
Why should we have any confidence in our intelligence any good? I mean, with all due respect, I mean, we thought that, to people, as everyone thought that, many people thought that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. We didn't find those. I mean, we've had other problems of intelligence on the ground in Afghanistan, in Iran. We never, years back in Iran. I mean, why should we have any confidence in any of our intelligence?
And remember, we dramatically underestimated where Saddam Hussein was at the time of the first Persian Gulf War. He was very close to nuclear weapons then. That's why I don't think you can play the game of what I call just-in-time non-proliferation, to say confidently, oh, negotiations can go on for another 9 months, 12 months, 15 months. If you miss by even one day and Iran has nuclear weapons, everything changes. That's why I would go now, frankly.
And in terms of, I mean, going now, is it, what's your level of certainty, though? You said we could get most of the areas. If we can't get all of them, isn't that tantamount to being totally ineffective? Because you only need, you only need one good facility to cause lots of damage.
Well, I think the more time that goes on, the greater the likelihood you're not going to get everything, precisely because Iran will be is building duplicative facilities. But I think we can break the nuclear fuel cycle at a couple of key points: the uranium conversion facility at Esfahan, the uranium enrichment facility at Natanz. There are a few others we need to go after. Better to go after them now than to wait.
All right, let's hope we don't have to get to that. So let me go back to the whole issue of sanctions, and maybe, let's hope that sanctions work. But even though he says that he doesn't care if he has 4,000 sanctions, it's not going to make any bit of difference. Are sanctions having any appreciable effect? I realize he's, bragging and boasting, but
yeah, I would disregard what he has to say. I think the sanctions over time have certainly increased economic pressure on the government, and that's one reason I do continue to favor sanctions. Ultimately, I'd like to bring that regime down. But nobody should be under any illusion that these sanctions are inhibiting their nuclear weapons program. And that's the key. It's not a question of we had 20 years to bring the regime down through sanctions, we'd stop the nuclear weapons program. They're very close to getting that capability.
If, though, I mean, a year ago, June, though, when they had the protests, I mean, if that had turned out differently, you know, so if the sanctions somehow, you know, increase people's willingness to protest and perhaps bring down the government, I mean, that would put us in a completely different posture.
Right, but you're looking at a series of trajectories. One trajectory is how much progress they've made towards nuclear weapons. Another trajectory is how much popular discontent there is. And another is what's the economic consequence of the sanctions. Unfortunately, in this race of these different trajectories, they are a lot closer to getting a nuclear weapon than to the regime falling.
And even if they don't find the nuclear weapon, they're getting better at hiding it because they got a lot of extra time learning how to make it even more covert than it is.
Exactly.
Ambassador, thank you, sir.